Welcome to Focus Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome back for episode 95 of Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on August 4th, 2017 on twitch.tv. Big shout out to the live chat here. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. This is your host, Blue Crew 86. Alongside me, we have the man who has been said to have the voice of a flower, Justin, or Fred. What is your name this week?
My name this week is Fred Orbit.
And you should get off my lawn.
Yes.
How's your tech working out over there?
My tech is doing great. Per the instructions of my tech wizard, Pins Halo, I haven't touched anything since we last spoke.
Sit on your hands. You have to sit on your hands.
Exactly. Don't touch anything. And then literally while he's saying that, I shiny. And he said, no.
It's the caboose. Button, button, button. Push. Oh, man. All right. Well, be sure to let Mel know we miss her over at Twitter at The Wind of the Stars. Life has been proving to be pretty hectic for her lately, and we want to show her support as she's getting everything sorted out. And from the depths of the madness-inducing mind maps, we are joined by our favorite Guntner, the one and only Dead Orbit music lover. Green, I hope you're doing well. I hear you're getting ready for a large geographical change over there.
Yeah. I've been doing a lot of painting. I spent all afternoon painting end tables and chairs and things because instead of buying new things, we're just pretending that we're buying new things by painting old things, and it's working out. It's just a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. You have Dead Orbit stools, so
yeah, some gray and white. A lot of gray in this. I have gray and purple and gray and white and gray and blue and all the gray and things. Kind of a gray week.
It's not black and white. It's a shade of gray.
Yes.
And
not that kind of shade of gray.
Yeah, it's just
how many shades?
No. We're gonna go through the intro and then we're gonna start the chat. The topic of today's chat is going to be a look at the lore of Dead Orbit. I stole the summary from Green again this week, so forgive me again if I don't do it the normal justice. There are those in the city who look beyond the walls, beyond the earth, beyond even the traveler and the supposed salvation that it offers humanity. They see another future among the light of other stars. They see the traveler and Earth itself as nothing more than celestial bodies caught in a dead orbit, a name which, appropriately, they have taken for their own. Their theology has evolved, moving past the fatalistic paradigm and into an obsession with worlds beyond Earth, focusing on construction of a fleet of ships which will prove capable of travel amongst the stars within which they believe our salvation truly lies. Dead Orbit seeks to rise from the ashes of our past, using the spoils of war and the technology long forgotten to forge forward and to escape the trap that, in their eyes, Earth has become. There is no room for sentiment in the world that Dead Orbit exists in, a world that is only existing because of an alien miracle, a miracle that in the eyes of Dead Orbit cannot be expected to occur again. This expectation is what drives the faction to push for humanity to be scattered across the stars, to become so far-flung that no single threat could possibly hope to destroy it all. This goal, the ultimate goal for human survival, justifies any sacrifice in the eyes of the Aurochs of Dead Orbit. Though the sacrifices they make are not just for themselves, but for all humanity. The thought of the city's children's eyes when the darkness comes drives them as much as the ghost of the dead future which Earth offers those who are foolish enough to stay. Before we get into that, however, I do have a few housekeeping notes. In our last chat, we took a look at Defenders. If you missed that and have any interest in hearing our thoughts, please be sure to check out the new www.focusfirechat.com for archives of all previous chats, links to the other aspects of Focus Fire Chat out in the internet, and a growing collection of community articles. If you don't mind, please give us some feedback on iTunes to let us know how we're doing, as well as to help us continue to grow. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering, where the intent is to offer a week-long, in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny and other games. This chat begins every Tuesday morning and runs until the following Tuesday, with topics decided by the group via a poll that begins every Friday and ends on the Tuesday morning of the new chat. Every Friday, at around 10 p.m. Central, we get together to stream a recap of the previous week's chats for those who are unable to participate. Please be sure to also give some support to the other podcasts in the Guardian Radio Network, found at theguardiansofdestiny.com. These include Guardian Radio, the first and longest running Destiny podcast on the net, Guardian 1, Ghost and Echoes, which also has the Destiny audio grimoire, and the network's newest edition, a non-Destiny focused podcast, Paragon Radio. Our next chat will be a look at the lore of the infamous Ticklefingers, the Stormcaller Warlock. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the information and thoughts that the community had about Dead Orbit. Lorebot, let's go.
Querying Grimoire Database. Results found. Displaying on screen.
Thank you, Randy. Just give it up for Randy and all that he does. I think, when we're talking about Dead Orbit, we're going to have, less Grimoire cards than if we were talking about a more, established storyline within Destiny lore. But we have some very cool tidbits here. And I think the best place to start is the actual Grimoire card for Dead Orbit. And it has a quote to begin it. "The traveler is not our only salvation. Another future lies out among the light of other stars." Dead Orbit's theology is developed from mere fatalism into an obsession with worlds beyond Earth. Now their focus is on the building of a star-faring fleet, cobbled together from the ashes of our past and the spoils of war. So yeah, Dead Orbit, they rather quickly shifted the focus from repelling the darkness and making safe this last stronghold, which was the last city, and all of the strongholds of the light. And they said, no, we shouldn't do that. We should make a fleet that could scatter us and make us harder to exterminate. In light of recent events, it's hard to find fault with that.
I swear I had a comment about that. I was like, I swear if one of the Dead Orbit Oroks doesn't just kind of like mutter like, "I told you so."
Hey, told you so.
It's like, yeah. And I think
hope we need a different one.
Yeah, no, and I think we'll get to that too here shortly. I know that was one of the concepts that we really wanted to touch on was the Oroks and kind of what they do within the Dead Orbit. So just to clear the air, I'm a Dead Orbit fan. Justin is not.
I would say I'm not. I actually, at the moment, I have one of each class and one of each faction. But my favorite is Future War Cult. But continue.
And then green is a commie, right?
I'm not a commie. I merely like red and white.
Honorable Executor.
And he looks like Triple Wreck.
Oh my gosh, he does.
So just for the record, we might not have the dispersed class presence on this podcast, but we do have an even distribution of factions. So no, and I think like the thing that really calls out or really like catches my eye with the Dead Orbit card, and I agree, Justin, actually all the factions really have really limited grimoire information. There's quite a bit of information that you can kind of glean from their weapons, especially the names. Like the names of the weapons are very, very telling. The ships are very telling, the names of the ships, and then also the shaders. Dead Orbit has some really cool shaders as far as naming conventions go. But the big thing that actually stood out for me in this card, and Green and I kind of talked about this a little bit, was the identification of not their ideology. No, it's their theology. And that to me is a really big distinction, because a theology is a form of ideology. So an ideology, just to kind of back up real quick, an ideology, when we say ideology, that's usually the system of ideas or ideals, especially one that forms the basis of economic or political theory or policy. So it's a very general term. Theology is basically an ideology, but it's religious beliefs and theory when systematically developed. And the other thing that theology is, it's a critical study of the divine, the nature of the divine. So, and I want to focus in on that a little bit further, and actually focus in on the fact that it's a critical study, which is something that most theologies actually encourage, is critical examination of their tenets, critical examination of their teachings and everything of that nature. Because by being critical and being constructively critical of those things, they are actually able to grow. Now, the other thing that it talks about is developing from mere fatalism into an obsession with worlds. So fatalism is the belief that all events are predetermined and therefore are inevitable. Okay, so that means that there is a set fate. There is, and which kind of comes from the fatal fate. And so they actually have developed from a mere fatalism. And we'll kind of get into this when we start talking about Jalal a little bit. But they are also noted as being nihilistic or nihilistic. And that is actually, nihilism is the rejection of all religious and moral principles, often in the belief that life is meaningless. This is applied in philosophy, usually with extreme skepticism that maintains that nothing in the world has a real existence. And so that's why when you talk about someone who has a nihilistic fatalism, that's usually a very negative person. Because basically what they're saying is that life has no meaning because there is no way to escape the fatal end. So that's kind of where, the intro to Dead Orbit is. They kind of see, and I mentioned this in the summary as well, they see the Traveler and Earth as being two things that are in what's called a dead orbit. That is an actual term. It's also known as a graveyard orbit. And there is a degree in which they have a quote actually that says, the only reason that humanity survived the collapse was because of an alien miracle. It was because of an external source that actually came in and interjected the destruction of humanity and actually saved us. And their entire argument is that they can't, you should not count on that happening again. If you count on that happening again, that is going to set you up for disappointment, because a miracle by nature is something that defies logic. You can't predict it. That being said, they view the Traveler as being something that's stuck in a dead orbit. A dead orbit is something that is generally, so when it's easily explained by a satellite, right? When we have a satellite that is done, right? There's nothing left for it to do, because satellites eventually, they always run down. Once the satellite reaches a certain threshold of usability, basically, the design is usually either I'm trying to remember the ratio or the plan. It's a 25-year plan, and basically what they use is they determine if they can crash the satellite back into the planet in a way that there is a 1 in 10,000 chance or less chance that someone will not get hurt, that someone will not get hurt, then they will bring it back into the atmosphere, and they will actually calculate it to re-enter the atmosphere. And usually they shoot it towards what's called, I think it's the Oh, the satellite graveyard, which is a location in the Pacific, which is basically a very small area that is the furthest point from any civilized area. And so they try to hit it in that. If, however, it is either too large or it exceeds that chance that someone will get hurt with it, they actually send it further up. They actually send it further away. So usually a satellite is what's usually called a synchronized orbit. So that generally what happens is when Earth, and Earth being the primary example here, when Earth is rotating, the satellite will generally stay within the same area of the Earth. So it's rotating at the same speed. When you shoot it into a graveyard orbit, it's actually it's super synchronism, which means that it's actually going further away and it's not going to be synchronized with the Earth because it doesn't matter. It's a dead orbit. There's no point in it. So that's where they actually took that name, because it's a dead celestial body. But I'm hogging the mic, and I know Fred over here has.
Yeah, it's I don't know the word for it, but it's the opposite of a decaying orbit. A decaying orbit would be one that slowly. Yeah, there you go. That's what it should be called. A decaying orbit would slowly get closer to that thing that it is orbiting. The super synchronous orbit gets farther and farther away until it gets slung out of that body's gravity, and
it's
becomes
the difference
dead.
between losing speed to be able to maintain an orbit versus having that speed and continuing that speed so quickly that you can actually pull yourself out of orbit.
So
and just to be clear, a super synchronized orbit, it is still in orbit. It's just a orbit that is. This starts getting into like astrophysics and like astrophysics and stuff that I am not well versed in. It's a difference between the synchronized orbit that a normal satellite would take, and it's not a subsynchronous, because a subsynchronous orbit would be a decaying orbit. So it's a supersynchronous orbit, which basically pushes it further out, so that basically the logic here is that it gets it out of the way of the high traffic orbit paths, so that other satellites don't hit it, is pretty much the logic of the graveyard orbit. So
I actually have a different take on the dead orbit name.
Okay.
If you look at the insignia for dead orbit, what do the proportions of that, aside from the skull, which none of us realized was a skull until I don't know who was it from
Luke
Bungie,
Timmons. Or
Luke Timmons posted.
I think
this is a profile.
Who was it?
No, was it Barrett?
Sorry. Yeah, it was Barrett. Yeah.
Okay. What's his first name? Sean?
I just went blank. Chris.
I can't remember. Chris Barrett. Yeah, Chris Barrett posted that's actually the dead orbit insignia is actually a profile of a skull.
Right.
Which once you hear that, it becomes a skull to you. But if you look at the proportions of the overall insignia with the circle, the skull in the middle, and then the smaller circle on the outside, what do the proportions seem to you in terms of size? The large circle.
Oh yeah, it's Earth and the Traveler.
The Earth, and then the Traveler. Now, if you want to go super literal with the name, there's a skull right over where the Earth would be, right?
Right.
And I think it ties in with their whole ideology in the fact that if you allow us to rely on this celestial body in this dead orbit, just sitting here, that's what we're all going to be. We're all going to be dead. Is I think it's just like a skull and crossbones over the Earth. Mm-hmm. If we all sit here and rely on this dead ball in the sky, we're going to die.
Yeah,
is how I look at it.
Well, I think that's definitely another attribute that Bungie has been very, very good with their symbols.
Mm-hmm.
They've done a great job of designing things that have multiple layers of meaning. Not only the fact that literally a dead orbit is an orbit that is going to, what Jay said, what Blue said, it's also the fact that maybe we're dead where we're sitting because we're on Earth still, and the Traveler is not really doing much anymore except for giving us a little bit of light boost. There's so many different layers.
Yeah, and they even call the Traveler out for
layers.
that, because they say that the darkness is gathering, the darkness is coming to us, and the Traveler is sitting there silent. And they are pretty blunt about their lack of faith in the Traveler getting involved, which, and that's kind of what appeals to me as my, like, just from a personal level, is they kind of have the approach of plan for the worst. And there's the unspoken other part of that statement. Plan for the worst, hope for the best.
But okay, that's part of their thing. But if you pull up the last array, the last array, you get, the card says the terrestrial array was dead orbits hope to reconnect to the lost colonies of our inner system. Yes, they want to be able to get off and get away from the Traveler, get off the Earth, get away from the Traveler, get away from the Earth, so we're not a sitting duck or not a target, because a giant orb in the sky is kind of hard to miss. But they have the hope of reconnecting with a lot of the lost ships, a lot of the lost colonies that might still be out there.
Right.
They are not just bailing on the Traveler.
Oh, yeah.
They're also reclaiming. They're
humanity.
Reclaiming things. Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's the thing is, they and there's a degree to which all the factions kind of have this similar thing. And the other important thing to remember with these factions is that these are not factions of Guardians. These are factions of humans, of civilians, of humans, awokens, exos that are not risen. They're mortal people. They use the Guardians as muscle, but they are not designed. They were not designed initially for. They don't plan on appeasing to the Guardians' way of life. This is actually for civilians to be survive, and that makes a lot of sense, because if you really sit down and think about it, Guardians really aren't humans anymore. They're not mortal anymore. They are kind of their own kind of species, right? And that is. When I look at the different factions, there's a degree of that really shines with each one of them. Dead Orbit, I was trying to find out, or I was trying to figure out. It's a conversation in psychology about the complexities of the fight or flight response mechanism, right? A lot of people, when you talk about fight or flight, it's usually, a lot of people think of it as a binary system. It really isn't. It's a very complex survivalistic evolutionary concept, because the thing is any animal will always have degrees, right? There's never and this is kind of another thing Green and I were talking about it before. It's the color scheme of Dead Orbit is black and white. Things are very black and white. Well, but they're not, because there's always a shade of gray. And you kind of do see that in even their color scheme as well. There is gray in their color scheme. But my point there is that each of the factions kind of aligns with a different aspect of the fight or flight response. You have the fight, which is the Rainbow Squad, right? That's pretty obvious. They turn around that's what they do. They turn around and they fight. They see the inevitability of war no matter where you go. Right. And see, the thing is that Dead Orbit doesn't necessarily disagree with them. The one response that they have about the War Cult is that they offer despair, because in Dead Orbit's eyes, and this is another thing that I really agree with. In Dead Orbit's eyes, the future War Cult has a point. They do. They have a point, but there's more to worry about than just fighting, because psychologically people cannot be at constant war What happens? I mean, you look at any of the men and women who have served through a war. It's a very, very detrimental effect psychologically on the population. And that's where they kind of, their response to the future war cult is, you're offering nothing but despair to your followers. Now, you do with what you will there. And then they turn to New Monarchy. New Monarchy, they say, offers false hope, because their entire problem with New Monarchy is that, they have this thing with putting up a king or queen, a monarch, to lead. Dead Orbit's like, okay, but if the Traveler can't stand up to the darkness, what makes you think that a king or queen could? Because you're going to stand here and die.
It's definitely a matter of perspective with all the different factions, because Future War Cult is not just the offering of the idea of war forever.
Right. And that's true.
New Monarchy is not just the concept of having a monarch. And this is something we talked about in chat this last week, is the fact that New Monarchy has the taking care of the people. Right. The seven tenets, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, if you're going to oversimplify, you can say New Monarchy espouses the centralized organizational method of saving humanity. Dead Orbit espouses the decentralized organizational method of saving humanity. And Future War Cult are space Vikings. Like,
I was really proud of you for all of that until the very end, because now I'm lost.
No, Blue. Your people are perpetual refugees. My people are space Vikings.
But
Continue.
Okay.
Where are you going to go with that?
Tell me right now that you don't want to watch a movie called Space Vikings.
Where are you taking that one, Green?
I just don't know where to take it. I don't understand why they're space Vikings.
You know why he's laughing? Because but behind all the silliness, there's a little bit of truth to that.
There's a little bit of truth. The funny thing too about that is, though, the historical reference of Vikings, or the sea people, they were wanderers.
Oh yeah, I'm just talking about the religious beliefs.
Yeah. Like the over obsession with war.
With like heaven is just us killing each other all the time for the rest of time.
Oh, yeah. That makes a lot more sense.
That mentally.
Now I'm following.
Space Viking.
Now you know what the device is it's a holographic chamber which shows them Valhalla.
Oh,
and
man.
Lakshmi is the old father.
Oh,
Good
God.
friend.
No,
she has both eyes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But
Silence, Frost Giant.
So and Green, I know you kind of pulled in like the last array, the actual quote from the last array. Do you want to read that one? Because I think that kind of ties into what you were saying.
Yeah. Dead Orbit has a pretty simple philosophy. We're all doomed. According to them, getting out of the system is the only way to survive. No surprise they'd want to find a way to connect with Rasputin and the colonial arrays. Ghost. Yeah, I mean, like Justin said, it's an oversimplification, but from first glance, that is exactly what Dead Orbit has. It's like, okay, if we sit in one spot, we're sitting ducks. We don't sit in one spot and we spread out, at least some of us will make it.
Yeah, and the other thing, so in line with that, the other thing that I kind of want to point out too with regards to what is Dead Orbit is the fact that Dead Orbit actually has arguably some of the best technicians and engineers in the last city. Which makes sense given that they're well, but it makes sense.
You found one card.
Oh no! Every single weapon of theirs says that it's due to their superb technicians. Like that's the flavor text on the majority of their weapons. The the majority of the different factions, like all the flavor text on weapons is generally about the same. The names are not, obviously, but the flavor text for all the weapons, it's not very... It's basically copy paste on all the weapons. So yeah, Deviant Gravity A was the weapon card that I pulled, but it does refer to Dead Orbit as having the superb technicians, which ties into the idea that Dead Orbit is focused on building a fleet, right? They're completely obsessed with building this spacefaring fleet to escape. So, of course, they would have technicians that knew what they were doing more so than, the faction that's trying to build law and justice, which is the New Monarchy. And you also see the factions of, Future War Cult, who will probably be more specialized in actual building weapons than any of the other factions. So it kind of gravitates towards those different strengths of the different factions as well as their interests. And that kind of... Right? I mean, does that make sense?
It does. It's just, I think it's reading into it a little bit because each faction's types of armor, or not armor, but the weapon lines, each faction's kind of reflects the tenets or reflects their own philosophy. And I get what you're saying that they would have. Right, but so like
for example, the Vanquisher 8, right? The Vanquisher 8, which is a New Monarchy, what is that, a assault rifle. It says, Executor issued auto rifle for loyal supporters of the New Monarchy.
Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, Future War Cult, like the Fulcrum says, a personal firearm augmented, named, and sanctified by the leaders of Future War Cult.
Right.
It's a reflection on the type of structure that they have, I think, more than necessarily... that they have the best ones.
Oh, well, and I wasn't saying that they have the best. I said I kind of think that they have some of the better, like in grades of what they're looking for when they get faction, faithful faction followers. They're going to focus more on technicians and specialists, whereas a New Monarchy, the New Monarchy is going to be, like what you guys were saying earlier. New Monarchy is going to be more along the lines of the factory workers, which was what was it? What was Hideo? He was
part of the. Well, he wasn't part of the foundries.
It wasn't a weapon foundry, but it was a textile.
Was it textile? Yeah, it was a textile plant.
Yeah, and so but I mean, that was his thing. Was he was all economics and politics and stuff like that. That's New Monarchy. Whereas Future War Cult is all warriors, time travelers, a stranger, those type of things. So yeah, I mean that's what I was kind of going for. Is like Dead Orbit is going to focus more on that technical and specialized engineers and mechanics and that particular aspect for people, whereas New Monarchy is going to go with the police force, that Dead Orbit also supplies the forces of the city. They supply a lot of their technology to them as well. So there's I know, Justin, you wanted to weigh in on that one.
No, actually, to go with that same type of vein, Black Flag in chat has it really. The city being destroyed might be the best thing to happen for all the factions. It's going to provide focus for them all. It's not necessarily focus, but I think it'll refocus them because they all already had their own agenda.
Yeah.
But I think it'll drive home why they held those beliefs to begin with, because I think it's easy to sit up in that tower and feel very abstractly about things, and be removed from them. But once your home is destroyed, now you're refocused and your drive is renewed.
Yeah, and I would argue that of all the factions, of all the great factions, the three major factions, I would actually argue that New Monarchy are really the ones that probably had, at the time of Destiny, not Destiny 2, but in the time of Destiny, they were probably more attached to what was going on in the city. And Libby is actually pointing that in the chat. The New Monarchy faction is often attributed to being the police force You know, they had the instance of Concordat. They were responsible for putting down the Concordat. There's a reference within Dead Orbit about how they circumvent the forces of the New Monarchy legal structure to get stuff to build ships. Like they will go around the legal system of the New Monarchy to get parts for their ships. So you kind of get this idea that New Monarchy probably is responsible more for the upkeep of the civilians, which makes sense, again, you know, with the focus that they have. Whereas Future War Cult, you know, they kind of are standoffish to begin with because they're so secretive. And that's kind of their thing. I don't know if necessarily the city being destroyed is really going to shake them from that particular tenet, because that's kind of what they've always done. You know, Lakshmi herself, we don't even know where she came from. Whereas Dead Orbit, it's kind of, I mean, I see, Justin, I see totally where you're going with that, and Black Flag, I agree. It's going to be really interesting to see how the factions respond, and you know what exactly happens to these great factions. Is this gonna shake it up so that we see other factions start rising, which would be cool, I think. You know, I'm not saying that there should be another faction war necessarily, but we know that these factions kind of come and go in a political system that it is. Green, I know you had something you wanted to toss in.
Justin, do you want to go first?
No, go right ahead.
The thing that I wanted to point out is that and I know we're going to jump ahead a little bit with the idea of just Destiny 2, we know on the farm at this point, the only faction logos that are found on the farm are Dead Orbits. That being said, it makes sense for Dead Orbit to be there because they're used to spreading out. They're used to going out and doing outside of the box type things. With New Monarchy not being there, New Monarchy's, like Blue was saying, their focus is taking care of the city, because you have all these people, all the refugees coming to the city. Their focus is take care of the people in the city. So it's fairly likely in my headcanon that New Monarchy will actually kind of be not necessarily at the tower, but be closer to the city than the farm.
I do see what you're saying. I think I'm going to throw the game mechanics argument in there just a bit, not to dodge the debate, but just because I don't know. It depends on if we get a second social space, right? Yeah, because I think if we were going to get another social space within a ruined city or something like that, yes, totally agree with you. 100%. I agree that New Monarchy would be in the city if we're just talking game story. Given game mechanics, I think that all the factions will eventually be on the farm. I think the point that I would go with is I do think that Dead Orbit was already on the farm, because again, yes, you're right. They kind of are the dispersed, you know, that's their big tenet. They could have already had a shop set up. Right. And I think that the other thing is remembering and correct me here if I'm wrong, but I believe that they said that as we progress through the story or through the game of Destiny 2, people will come and go from the farm. So the other thing that we could see is because remember, this is immediately following the incident, I guess, the fall, or I hesitate to call it the collapse, but the fall of the city. This is immediately following that. So you could also see an instance of, as you progress through the campaign, depending on how dynamic of a game world they want to build, you could actually see those other factions show up, you know, in the farm, because they are now coming to the farm because it is now a safe spot. Whereas before it wasn't necessarily that it wasn't a safe spot. It was just no one really cared about it because it was not the city. Dead Orbit, on the other hand, is like, yeah, we're here because if something happens, oh wait, something happened, and you know, just
makes sense.
You know, this is complete Game Wish tangent. They have analytics on all this stuff, so I know it's possible. I don't know how feasible it is, but I would love it if the number of people
yes
with a faction allegiance dictated which factions
Oh my
banners
gosh.
flew in certain social spaces. And I know it's
Oh
possible.
my gosh.
Whether or not it's feasible from a opportunity cost standpoint would be amazing. Like, seriously, if you're really an dead orbit, supporter, and you can't stand to see that new monarchy flag fly in the farm,
Go out and do more public events.
Exactly. or just make it to where you could do thing to, each thing you do gives you a little bit, do public events, farm spin foil,
build your faction rep. It
play Crucible, and then that goes into the aggregate bin, and then also does the number of people pledging their allegiance, because if they keep with the model of you can only rep one faction at a time, if that stays to be the norm, which I really like, as opposed to the class item system wherein you had to be like, oh, I'm trying to rep Future War Cult, and I don't have that cloak on this character, and I got to move it, and as opposed to nope, repping Future War Cult all week long. I picked it up, I've activated it, I'm good. They could take all that data and they could make it be more of that thing, like, it's the more prevalent faction is the one that shows up in the farm. But I really don't know. If you had asked me before they revealed the farm, what would be the most likely spot for social space for Dead Orbit to be most prevalent in, I would not have said a farm. I would have said some sort of derelict spaceship out in the far reaches of space. Something kind of like the Reef is a picture.
No, they have a bad experience. They have bad experiences with derelict spaceships on the Reef.
They do. Don't we have that card in the?
That's the Ghost Fragment.
But anyways, that was my wish list. That was my wish list. Little kind of tangent. So
Green, I
know. Mesa Sean actually talked about that on Guardian Radio. How he wanted, and I agree. I think to have something like this where in Patrol, if you could have essentially your faction pull together and complete patrols, and then that ups the amount of faction points that you have, and have faction wars, another version of faction wars that is productive rather than counterproductive. I think it would be fun. I'd be for that.
That would be a way. That would be a way that when the game did reach a lull, that the solo player, the person who's just still grinding Destiny because that's what they do, that would be a way that they could, they've got all the weapons they want. They've got all the items, that they really want. What are they playing for?
Right.
We're playing so I don't have to see the gray and black and white fly anywhere. That's what I'm playing for.
I'll be honest. It would bring me back. I mean, that's the thing for me is like, we've had this conversation a lot, beyond Fourth Wall and in conversations off air about my feelings towards the PvE. And I think that this would be definitely something that would appease, people who are more in my line of playing video games from a solo perspective, for an RPG perspective. This would totally, this would open up the dynamic aspects of the game, and really it would. Especially if you put it on like a weekly or a bi-monthly schedule, oh man, you bet I would be there grinding out, the public events or just running patrols. And, because that's the thing is that's what patrols were always presented as. Was you helping out the factions, you helping them complete things that, you were on the moon already. Well, there's no civilians on the moon, but, what was it? Future War Cult or Dead Orbit? I could never remember. Needed those helium coils. They're like, oh, hey, you're up there. Can you get us some? And you run around and you pick up the helium. That was always kind of the thing that was lying there behind the scenes, was they were sending Guardians out to do these things and to bring these back, and then they would reward them with Glimmer or build you with rep, and that's kind of the logic, was that entire process. So I think that'd be amazing.
It always bugged me a little bit that exactly what you were just saying, that the patrols were these quests or these bounties essentially that all the different factions would put out there, but no matter what faction you repped, no matter what you wore, with whether it was New Monarchy or Dead Orbit or Future War Cult, you could do faction or patrols for any of the factions, and you were helping any of them.
Yeah, and I think so. Go for it.
I think that's gaming mechanic mainly, just to be able to not have to. I mean, they could literally change who is getting what.
Right.
You could change the card, but it's just like, okay.
There's a degree of that, but also the way I kind of explained it in my head canon was that the Guardians belong ultimately to the Vanguard, right? The Guardians are ultimately in the Vanguard. That is their prime, if you want to call it a faction. It's not really a faction, but it kind of is. They belong to the Vanguard. Now, within the Guardian ranks, you have personal philosophies that differ, which is where you get the alliance to these particular factions. But ultimately, remember what happened when Guardians just answered to factions. We had really bad instances of faction wars. And that was the kind of the thing that we actually, within the Age of Triumph, we learned that Andal Brask actually kind of put a stop to was and I kind of, and again, this is just the way my understanding of the political hierarchy is. If you're a Guardian, you ultimately follow the ruling of your mentor, right? You have, if Ikora comes down and says, you are not allowed to do this, even if Hideo or Jalal or Lakshmi are telling you, hey, we need you to do this, you are kind of obligated to follow the Vanguard, because as a Guardian, you are called to a higher purpose than just the political factions, which also you see a lot of that in Shax's response to the factions, because he hates them. He views them as scum. He doesn't, but at the same time, if you look at what the Crucible's doing, the Crucible is not just a battleground physically. It's actually a political battleground as well. I mean, that's part of the quest for the different faction exotic items. You're gaining rep in the Crucible. You're for those particular factions, which actually kind of goes to the point of these factions then have these bragging rights of, yeah, we have this Guardian behind us. We have the strength of this Guardian. We have the strength of that Guardian. And so that's where that kind of political Red Rover match kind of, the sponsorship deals. Yeah. So, I mean, there's that. I just, in my head, I kind of see a Guardian as, because you also could turn down patrols really easily, right? You could just say, oh, that's a Future War Cult or Future War Cult patrol. I don't really like them. I'm not going to go help them do that. Or oh, that is a Future War Cult thing, or that's a Dead Orbit thing. I'm gonna definitely make sure that I get that done at the cost of doing something for New Monarch.
It was a long time before I realized that you turned them down.
Right. Well, no, but within my kind of my storytelling when I play, that's kind of how I've come to terms with the smorgasbord of options as far as patrols go, because ultimately you are a Guardian of the city. You are not you're not an enforcer of fill-in faction. You are a Guardian of the city.
The thing is, you have to remember that the factions are not made up of Guardians. We are sponsored and we wear their banners, but the actual factions themselves, Jalal and Lakshmi and Hideo, are not Guardians. They don't have a ghost. They're literally just humans or exos or awoken that happen to be leaders of this group that are not Guardians. We are literally just sponsored sports stars, essentially.
Right. And I would even make the point, too, that they're not even necessarily leaders. They are the representatives to the tower. They are the spokesperson to the tower. They're not necessarily the leaders of those particular factions. Which I would
almost argue Jalal is... I would say Jalal's one of the higher ones within the Erics.
And that I was actually going to say that actually is a good segue into our next talking point. Was who are the Iraqs and what are they? What are they? Green, do you want to grab the faction rep card?
Sure. Dead Orbit faction rep, Arak Jalal. Jalal is a man driven by the ghost of a dead future. Critics accuse Dead Orbit of nihilistic fatalism, and Jalal would be the first to agree that Earth is lost, the city is a fatal trap. The Iraqs have no time for sentiment. Only an alien miracle prevented human extinction during the collapse. Jalal dreams of a diaspora to come. Humanity ascendant, scattered across the stars, too far flung for any single threat to reach. Jalal's utilitarian practicality drives him to bend laws and break rules in the name of Dead Orbit's great project. When the ultimate goal is human survival, any sacrifice can be justified. So, I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier with the nihilistic fatalism, and I know you want to go into that a little bit more. Do you want to jump into that real quick talk about all the different terms in this card that may be... bear with me for a little bit, because this is kind of an interesting connection to actually a number of different philosophers. But primarily, actually, it connects to Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche. But before that, real quick, I wanted to kind of go back to a term that was used in this card, and is actually the idea or the name of the ghost shell, the diaspora. Diaspora is really honestly just a word that means the dispersion of any people from their original homeland. There is a specific instance of this, and that is the dispersion of the Jews beyond Israel. And that is actually where that term originates. So that being said, I want to jump really quick into the connection with Nietzsche. A lot of people know Nietzsche as the kind of a surface knowledge of him as being the person who claims that God is dead. The problem with that is that in the same way that we oversimplify the factions, that is a gross oversimplification of Nietzsche. So if you, and I'm gonna link, I think it's I want to say it's Stanford that has this really good article on the philosophers, and they have a really good one on Nietzsche. But I'm gonna link that in the show notes, because anyone who actually wants to kind of look at this in a little bit more detail, Nietzsche has a really good point. And actually, when you get into some of his later kind of paradoxical pronouncements, there is actually a degree of hope in him. It's just not the happy-go-lucky hope that a lot of people kind of think of, because in the context of his time, it was very common for the intellectuals of Europe to assume that ideas such as altruistic concern, guilt for wrongdoing, moral responsibility, compassion, demand for equal consideration, and so on, they kind of assumed that these ideas were just there. They were there. They didn't really need to go into detail. Now, they tried to do a rational grounding kind of independent from that, but they didn't really stress on it. And Nietzsche kind of came in and was like, no, this is, you need to challenge this. And so, most philosophers assume that a secular vindication of morality would surely be kind of forthcoming, it's just there. So Nietzsche actually found this as being extremely naive. And so he basically dedicated all of his rhetorical strength to shocking readers out of complacency on this. And so that's where you get the idea of like the doubts about the viability of Christian underpinnings for a moral and a cultural life. He doesn't present them in this like this sunny like presentation of hopefulness. But he also doesn't really present he doesn't really kind of take from a sober perspective either. He basically just goes right for the throat in this paradoxical pronouncement that God is dead. But at the same time, he doesn't
he's not saying that God, it's not atheism. He basically says this pronouncement arriving because he says that the belief in the Christian God has become unbelievable. And he goes on and says that everything that was built upon this faith, it was propped up by it, it was grown into it, including the whole of the European morality, is destined for collapse. Christianity no longer commands society-wide cultural allegiance as a framework grounding ethical commitments, and thus a common basis for collective life that was supposed to be immutable and vulnerable has turned out to not only be less stable than we assumed, but incomprehensible mortal, and it's in fact already lost. And so that's where Nietzsche kind of was like, okay, no. Everything that you've held to be this immutable fact that this is never going to go away, you cannot rely on that. You have to understand the basic foundations of this. And to do that, I have to I have to shock you so badly that it makes you wake up. And it was kind of that slap across the face to wake people up. That was kind of one of his primary points of a lot of his rhetoric. And Green, I know you had a bit of. I kind of want to let you kind of weigh in on this too, because I know we kind of talked about this before the show. So I wanted to give you a chance to kind of respond to that. I have a little bit more that I can go into after that, but did you want
as the ideology and
as far as the
in general,
yeah,
or?
Nietzsche in general.
Oh, and okay, so Blue and I have very different backgrounds when it comes to philosophy. Blue literally was a philosophy major, right?
Yeah.
And I actually went to a private liberal arts college, and my professor was a Quaker minister. So we had very, very little Nietzsche, but reading into Nietzsche, it is kind of the idea of he's going to jerk you around to make you think differently in any which way he can. And that's just the whole point of Nietzsche in a lot of ways. It's just like, okay, really, 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 really want you to think outside the box, because once you get stuck in a certain social structure or a mental structure or a religious structure, it's really hard to get out unless you shock yourself out of it, which is his whole point. Dead Orbit and Nietzsche, the idea that Dead Orbit is nihilistic and fatalistic, it's like what I was saying earlier. Yes, they have those tenets that seem very much so giving up on what is there. But if you look beyond the curtain of what the immediate idea of it is, you can see past and see that they're just breaking you out of the comfort zone of the city. They're breaking out of the comfort zone of your thought of, this is where I've been. This is where I've always been. This is the place I'm going to always be. Break out of that, just like Nietzsche broke it. Even if you have to do it kind of not nicely, you can move on into the idea that, yeah, we're going to spread out. And speaking of spreading out, I know Justin and I have really been chatting quite a bit in Discord because there's a huge connection. And I know we're getting into it soon. So is there anything that you want to talk about Nietzsche before we move on into the next thing?
I do just have one final quote. And this is again from the Stanford article that I'll link, but and I'll just read this and then I'm going to let you guys take over, because I know the next point that you guys are going with, and I really like it as well. So finally, as far as defense for the reason why Nietzsche was doing what he was doing, there's a quote that says, "Not only do standard moral commitments lack a foundation we thought they had, but stripped of their veneer of unquestionable authority, they prove to have been not just baseless, but positively harmful. Unfortunately, the moralization of our lives has insidiously attached itself to genuine psychological needs, some basic to our condition, others cultivated by the conditions of life under morality. So its corrosive effects cannot simply be removed without further psychological damage. Still worse, the damaging side of morality has implanted itself within us in the form of a genuine self-understanding, making it hard for us to imagine ourselves living any other way. Thus, Nietzsche argues, we are faced with a difficult, long-term restoration project in which the most cherished aspects of our way of life must be ruthlessly investigated, dismantled, and then reconstructed in healthier form, all while we continue somehow to sail the ship of our common ethical life on the high seas. And that's the end of the quote. Mm-hmm. And if you think about that, that is kind of, and to kind of bring that back into line with the dead orbit, thing here, that is kind of what they are also kind of challenging you on, is they're saying you are existing in a city that is protected by an alien miracle. You cannot rely on that alien miracle to be there at all times, especially in a dire need. So you need to break out of that sense of, and it kind of nodding to the Maslow hierarchy of needs, which we've talked about as well before.
It's even more than that.
Well, I mean, but this is like simplification.
The coming of age.
Right.
It's the coming of age problem.
Right, but I mean, you see a very, very blatant nod towards Maslow's hierarchy in the beginning of Destiny 2, when it's like, hey, yeah, you had a city that was protecting you. Your biggest concern was, oh, I hit my glimmer cap, I don't have enough, whatever, and now. Good luck finding a place to sleep, because we took it all away. We stripped you down to the foundations of your... And the thing that Dead Orbit is saying is you need to prepare for that, because if you don't prepare for that and it happens, that is even more... And that's the argument, is the fact that you weren't prepared for it is an even bigger shock than if you were prepared for it. It's the argument of the Armageddon preps, like the people who are obsessed with the end of days. Those people, if the end of days ever happens, if Armageddon ever happens, and these people, if the zombie outbreak ever happens, these people are going to be not necessarily at the top of the mountain shouting, "I told you so," because they'll probably be in a bunker somewhere, with all their stuff. But I told you so. But I mean, it's kind of the same thing. We kind of make fun of those people because these crazy people who are preparing for the end of days. But at the time that the end of days actually happens, those are the people who are going to know what to do.
Yeah. And I feel really lucky because I live in Texas. And
right. You're surrounded by those people.
We're all those people. So we're literally like, oh my gosh, guys, there's a zombie. And it'll be a race to see how who can shoot him. You mean we can shoot somebody? Finally.
Okay. Before we move on from that, I wanted, and this is something that's not in the show notes, because your description of how Dead Orbit reacts to the city coming down, it reminds me of the journey from a youth becoming a man. You're protected by your mother and father all through your youth, and then how do you become a man? Even in tribal societies, they put you through some great trials where you don't get mama, you don't get dad, you're face to face with a god, essentially, in a lot of tribal societies.
Right.
And you have to, if you don't follow the rules, if you don't follow the stuff that's set up ahead of you, that's been planned by the society that you are supposed to be becoming a man into, you're going to be taken away and possibly killed. It's this growing up. We are growing up from being a protective little group that stays in the city and being forced to go and stretch our legs a little bit more.
Yeah. So
Justin, I know you have, I was about to say.
Yeah. The whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think it's actually illustrated in the little cinematic you got if you played the D2 beta. No matter what, I think this is right. It's hard for me to remember. No matter what character you played, each homecoming mission started the same. You were flying a ship coming back to the city, and your ghost literally told you, "Hey, you remember when I told you that you fly too fast? Well, fly fast now." Like it's literally, remember when I still was griping at you for, breaking a minor safety type,
forget that.
Forget that and fly fast now because we've got to get home. So it's definitely that. Um,
Well, I know you guys.
are you all done with Nietzsche?
Yeah. I was about to say I'm all done. I know you guys had a. I know you wanted to talk about the Iraqs. I believe is the part that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. I'm
You
the
wanna
king
start it,
of
Justin?
rock. There is none higher. Sucker MCs call me sire. Sorry. Wait, no, that's Run DMC.
That was pretty darn good. I'm impressed you knew all that.
Yeah. No. So Green and I were kind of chatting back and forth, and the parallels with the Hebrew people just keep stacking up here. Iraq is actually has an Old Testament Hebrew meaning, and it kind of, whenever you look up the meanings of these ancient languages, you can find a bunch of them. So it's all about just finding the one that speaks to you sometimes. If you're in the business of drawing tenuous connections like I am. But yeah, so Iraq, as it's phonetically pronounced, can mean to wander, journey, or go, or keep company with. To journey or go. But the one that I really like is wandering or wanderer. So
Or
when
traveler.
you think of yeah, exactly. Traveler at the end. You got to love that. But you've got to think that the Iraq of the dead orbit is the chief wanderer. He's like, he's the leader of the,
Well, here's the
ca-
beautiful
the
thing.
caravan.
We have a list of the various Iraqs. There's actually multiple because we have them show up in a lot of bounties and items and missions type cards. We have Iraq Linda, Iraq Henri, if you say it like a Frenchman, Iraq Modesta, Iraq Parnell, and Iraq Jalal. And if you look at Hebrew societal structure, like ancient Hebrew societal structure, it's like, yay, my little Christian private school thing's coming in handy now. The history of the Hebrew people is they have very familiar head of governing bodies. The heads of all the families are the ones who are in charge. And in some ways, this could very well be similar. There's no king. There's no one person to be in charge of everything. It is a group setting. It is a small panel of people. And they all have very, very different views. Just the idea that dead orbit is similar to the Hebrew people who are forced out and who also want to go out and wander. It makes me wonder if they're going to bring them all back together at some point, or if they're going to have a section where they can come back together. What do you think, Justin?
So I also want to say, remember Iraq as being wanderer or wandering or traveler, right? The name Jalal is actually a Muslim name. And it means grandeur, glory, or faith. So when you put that together and you think of it being, he is Iraq Jalal, which is wandering glory or wandering faith, that can really bring some subtext to his cause. You know what I mean? That is his name. He is literally named to be the light in the darkness, the wandering hope, if you will, for his faithful. I just thought that was really cool. Like and then when you go back to the term used in the last card, diaspora, as being the scattering of a people, and then so you're dealing with just a wandering people.
And the fact that they're not an ideology, they're based off of a theology. There's kind of a religion to dead orbit.
They view their god as dead, though.
Yeah.
do they view the? I mean, is
Well,
the traveler their image
there's.
of the
I don't know
god?
that the traveler
that's-
is their god. Though.
Right. I mean, what I mean
think
there
their
is
god
that they
is
view,
hope.
right. Well, and that's a fair point.
But the thing is, some of them don't necessarily have hope.
So
Rock Henry, he says, "At least we know we tried." I mean, that doesn't sound terribly hopeful, quite honestly. Some of the different ones don't.
Right,
sound
but then
super
you have,
hopeful.
what is it, Lindy, whatever, Lind.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I love this. We're not fatalists. We're optimists. We believe life exists beyond this dead orbit.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's, it was Parnell. Yeah. And I think this is from the Heliopause. The once deep space explorers were seen as heroes. Now, for just suggesting humanity should look beyond the system, some call us cowards.
Right. It's just the matter of perspective, and they don't have somebody who can actually sell their idea very well.
I think we throw the term fatalist around very readily. If I am realistic, okay, and I acknowledge the fact that I won't live forever, am I a fatalist? Because I believe that this road for me ends in death. I'm not a fatalist. I'm just in touch with reality. I'm an optimist. I believe that all good things in life can come to me, but I'm cognizant of the fact that I'm mortal and that, you know, eventually this ends.
Right. I mean, it's the
right, but okay,
that's kind of like a muddy kind of
right. But here's the thing: is like there. I think so. So there's a difference. Just kind of backing up a little bit. There's a difference between fatalism, and then there's a difference between what I think you're talking about, which is realism. You know, like, because fatalism is more of the idea of the big picture, like everything kind of just comes to an end, and there is no meaning. There is no, you know, which is where the nihilism comes in as well. Because if you add in nihilism, then it's really depressing. But
nihilism is everything's going to go wrong.
No, well, nihilism is that the life is meaningless. That there's nothing real.
Okay,
I got you. Is Oryx's handbag.
My understanding of nihilism is like chiefly from the movie The Big Lebowski. So
yeah, so nihilism is basically going back. The philosophical belief of nihilism is extreme skepticism, maintaining that nothing in the world has real existence. So nothing is real. Pessimism is the one that everything is going to go wrong. That's pessimism. And then fatalism is just, you know, it's inevitable, that all events are predetermined and therefore inevitable. But what I really wanted to kind of go back to, also, you're talking about, you know, the idea of them being a fatalist. That's where their entire and this is, I just said I wasn't going to bring this up, but that's where the entire concept of the Endling comes in. And you want to talk about a creepy concept, the Endling, which is the last living human. And this is something that haunts the Iraqs. Iraq Jalal says that he's haunted by the Endling, the last living human. That's the, you know, the age old, write the scariest story in 2 sentences. The last man on earth sits down in a chair and he hears a knock on the door. You know, that's right. But I mean, you know, like that's the idea, is that there is a point at which things end. Everything ends. Everyone dies. That is inevitable, unless you're a guardian, which arguably you can still die then too. But everything, there is a natural beginning and a natural end. That's just the structure of life. That is a realistic approach. Fatalism comes in by saying the things that happen are inevitable. Like, you don't have a choice. Yeah. There is no, which is kind of a destined end. There is a fate. There is a structure of no free will within a fatalism. That's where you kind of are drawn to that, and that's where you kind of go for it.
It's like Dead Orbit is literally the antithesis of the concept of destiny.
Yeah.
What? No.
Well, we broker in hope.
Not necessarily like the idea that not the game Destiny, but our idea of predeterminism.
Dead Orbit is a struggle against that, because they're saying that they are trying to put off the destruction of humanity.
They're trying to put off the dependence on another.
Correct.
Because
they are trying to make self-reliance the important piece.
Right, because Jalal says, here's the secret we've already lost. Now we see who lives to fight again. And I don't think when he says we've already lost means that they lost because of the Traveler going down.
I mean,
I think he means we're lost because we became dependent on the Traveler.
Yeah, and then you also have their armor. So this kind of ties into, one of their sets of armor is called the Fate Killer. They have a Fate Killer armor set. Like there's a point at which
there's an Endling armor set.
Yes, the Endling armor set is, God, just the entire concept of the Endling is really kind of creepy.
Yeah.
And then they're which kind of actually brings me into real quick into the shaders, because I know a lot of people kind of like the black and white motif that Dead Orbit has, right? Two of the shaders I was actually able to find some pretty cool little trivia facts on. There are two that I have theories on, but I had nothing that I could find necessarily. So those were the first ones. Let's run through the two that I don't know what's going on with them. Bitter Steel, I got nothing. I looked for a while, and the only thing I could find is apparently there's something in this this big thing called Game of Thrones. There's apparently a character that has Bitter Steel in his name. That's it.
And I'm thinking of like an invective from like from an old school pirate movie, like taste my bitter steel.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was going for too. I was like bitter steel, like literally it's bitter steel. I don't know. That's all I got. The Nowhere. I swear that is a term for the afterlife that I've heard in mythology, but I could not find it. So I don't have anything on that one.
Wouldn't the Nowhere be the in between?
Yeah, it's kind of like the veil.
Upside down.
Nope, we're not going there.
No.
Actually, the upside down. Actually, it would not be the upside down. It would be the veil through which you have to pass to get to the upside down.
Do you know what I think of as the Nowhere? Did you read the Heinlein book? God, dang it! Now, Stranger in a Strange Land.
Yes.
Basically, when he started to like realize his powers, Martian friend, he could turn people 90 degrees from everywhere.
Okay.
That was the Nowhere to me. Like that's
okay.
Literally what is 90 degrees from every possible vector and direction. Nowhere.
Fair enough. You win that one.
Yes.
Okay. So then comes the next one, which is Revenant, which I think that's if I remember right, Revenant's the solid black one. Or close to solid black one. It's not super black. Revenant is basically
like brownie black.
Yeah, it's wait. But anyways, Revenant is actually a mythological entity, and it is actually very similar to vampires. They are believed to be usually something that requires the sustenance of blood or life force in the same capacity as a vampire, but they're not quite as elegant. A revenant is literally a person who has returned, especially supposedly from the dead. They were typically viewed as wrongdoers in life that were brought back to haunt the living and were often associated with spreading of disease. And fun little trivia fact, general means of removal were exhuming the body, a form of decapitation, and then burning and removing the heart. So it was not a very happy thing. That brings me to the happy one, which is the Hanged Man. This is actually a tarot card, and the kind of the interesting thing about this is that it's often seen as when you look at it, it's seen as a punishment, right? But the tarot card
it depends on how it's turned.
Right. There's that, but the tarot card is generally meant to represent self-sacrifice. And in some cultures, or mostly the Norse cultures, it's also a representation of Odin, who hung himself to gain knowledge, who actually sacrificed himself to gain something. So the hangman it's perceived, and actually within the Catholic faith and the Christian faith, St. Peter was believed to be shown. He was crucified upside down. And so there's also representations within some of the tarot cards after that period that were him on the cross upside down. That being said, those are the shaders. And then I know as far as pulling back to, green. Also, there are a few portrayals of the hangman as being Judas. There is a portrayal of them having a bag of silver coins. And that is the not good version of the cards.
That's a creepy one.
Yeah,
that's a very creepy one.
Very creepy ones. But yeah, so that's kind of the connection between the shaders and the idea of this not necessarily. They're not necessarily happy, but they're not necessarily all like super depressed. Like they're not. Yeah, so it's got a lot of depth to it. I know you guys also did you guys have anything else on the Iraqs? Did we want to talk about the unknown Iraq?
His name was Dwayne Johnson, right?
Oh, good Lord.
Yikes.
Go ahead.
So
he's a
we
national treasure.
Reference. Oh, I'm not going to comment on that. There's a reference to another Iraq in Ghost Fragment Dead Orbit, which we kind of talked about a tiny bit earlier because it has to do with the derelict ship that we talked about. And he's the one who is the last of the crew of the Sophia. And makes me wonder that the Iraqs were originally the family heads, kind of how that idea we were talking about, the Hebrew structure, the heads of these little groups that went out to seed and colonize. Maybe there were different Iraqs on some of the different colony ships. Now, I don't know if there probably wasn't Dead Orbit before the collapse, but ships that went out afterwards to possibly colonize. Anyway, this is that sad story where he's kind of gone crazy and hasn't slept in 7 days, and they're in the asteroid belt, and they're losing power, and there's lots of
the Awoken are teasing them.
Because the Awoken are not necessarily nice. They're like cats with the plaything. I mean, yeah, it's just not a happy story, but we don't know the name of this Iraq or what their function was besides just part of the crew.
They were scavengers that were there on behalf of the fleet.
Mm-hmm. Of Dead Orbit people, which apparently they did not have the correct technicians on this fleet ship.
No, they did not have superb technicians on this ship.
Because they all stayed in the city.
That is a very good point. They did not.
They didn't have pins.
They didn't have pins with them.
No.
Pour one out for pins.
No, pour one out for the crew of the Sophia.
I am ready, and this is the section I've been excited about the entire episode.
Here she goes. Everyone hold on.
There has been theories put out on Reddit that aren't great, but it's still a fun thought experiment to play, that Dead Orbit actually sabotaged us for D2. That they did not report correctly to Zavala about the Cabal's presence, or that they were just negligent. Now, I don't necessarily think that's the case, but you never know. It's a fun thought process to get yourself into.
Be careful who you're accusing of things.
I'm not accusing. I didn't say I'm accusing. It's just a fun thought game, to think that, hey, maybe this dead orbit guy over here, maybe
Baseless accusations.
maybe he's not so good after all. No, there's a couple of instances where dead orbit has been the ones watching the Cabal. In Skyburner's card, they talk about dead orbit assures the city that the Skyburner fleet poses no immediate threat to the city. And there's a couple other instances with talk to Jalal and meet with dead orbit and another talk to Jalal, where they talk about the remaining Cabal forces and our system have been severely weakened. Dead orbit, let's see here, where is it at? The last one is, so that's the two Cabal ones. And then there's one where it says meet with Dead Orbit. Dead Orbit's up to something. I don't know what they're planning, but their agents are fond of pulling Guardians aside, whispering to any who will listen. They want nothing to do with the Traveler. And if it were up to them, nothing to do with the Tower. And then the last one, Rock Jalal, Dead Orbit communications have spiked 50% since you joined up. I'm not sure what they're planning, but they filed a number of interesting requests with Savala's office. Whatever they're looking to do, it's big. So these are super, not conclusive evidence whatsoever, but one at this time could make a fairly open-ended argument on they possibly knew something was coming and didn't report it.
What?
Just saying.
What?
To give themselves a head start, because just from my experience, because from my experiences dealing with predators, you don't have to be the fastest. You just have to not be the slowest.
Oh, that's evil.
That's not evil. That's survivalism.
Oh, man.
I'm not saying I'll push you down to make you the slowest.
But I'm not going to help you up.
I'm middle of the pack is where I am, because I don't know what's around the corner, and I don't want to, because whatever catches you is going to stop to eat you, and then I'll have more time.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to run into something because you're in the
Life
front.
is unfair.
Right.
Oh, man.
Theme song for D2.
Yeah.
You're not the boss of me now. Oh, that'd be so hilarious if they did like a Borderlands intro with that song playing.
Oh God!
Did you guys see?
Stag.
Did you see the dub over with oh God, what was that song? They did a dub over of the intro with like this happy. So it was totally like a Borderlands intro. I'll have to find it.
Wow.
I'll link it to you guys. But yes, it was exactly like that, Justin. You would absolutely love it. Do you guys want to jump to dispatches?
Yes, let's do that.
All right.
Dispatches from the wilds.
All right. Well, we got a couple dispatches, and Justin, in true fashion, I will let you read the next one from Mr. Infested Potato. But real quick, from Taylor B, we had a question. Actually, we had, I think, a couple questions in here. He says, I wanted to ask your thoughts on whether Guardians within dead orbit like Iraq Jalal intend to, or perhaps before the events of D2 intended to, potentially give up their connection to the Traveler as they spread out in the galaxy. Like, say if their faction convinced mankind to leave, would Dead Orbit be prepared to lose that advantage in protecting the spread-thin groups of mankind? First response is, we kind of talked about this a little bit. Jalal, I don't think, I'm almost 100% sure Jalal is not a Guardian. I'm 98% sure that he is not a Guardian. That being said, I am open to being proven wrong on that one. But I don't know. I really honestly don't know. I think this kind of goes back into the conversation we were having earlier about the true hierarchical nature of the factions and what they're really concerned with. I think that Dead Orbit is opportunistic in regards to using the resources that they have available to them. So they are using the Guardians because the Guardians are present. If they went beyond the heliopause or went beyond the, what is it? The Saturn, is it Saturn or Jupiter that the light doesn't go beyond? Do we remember?
It's beyond the 9 is one of the quotes.
Well, that would be the Jovians or Jupiter.
Jupiter. Okay. So if they went beyond that, technically, there could be an argument being made that the Guardians would no longer have connection to the cell service that they need. They would not be able to hear the Traveler, and so I don't know. I don't know. That's a really good. I don't know. What do you guys think on that one?
I think that, kind of tagging off of yours a little bit, I think Dead Orbit is literally, I don't think they're planning on taking Guardians.
Okay. That's kind of my thought as well. I just don't, I mean, I don't think they would turn down Guardians, but I think they're planning on not having them. I think because think of the Sophia card that we just went through. They found the ghost on a, let's see here. They found him not on the ship, their ship. Yeah, they found it on was it the Sophia?
They found it on.
No, it was.
They're
sorry.
part of the Sophia.
It's
they're found.
What was the acronym? A113.
Yeah, they jumped to ship A113. So they didn't have any Guardians with them that we know of, because if they did, they probably would have been able to record a little bit more than just, hey, wake up, little guy, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. You're the last person the last thing I can talk to at this point, because we're all dead. I mean, I don't think Dead Orbit really has any of the interest of the Guardians in particular in mind. Humanity, yes, they want to spread out. I think they are all for making sure nobody can get to them. But I don't think that they're taking into account Guardians. Maybe Guardians are willing to give up their light for it. Maybe they've already experimented with that. We don't know. But I don't think they're planning necessarily on having the Guardians with them, because they haven't really had them with them thus far.
Yeah, and Hiko's kind of saying what I'm thinking. We're kind of tied. Guardians are tied to the Traveler. By default, if they leave the Traveler, they're kind of gonna have to abandon us. Also, side note on the trivia side, A113 is an inside joke. It's actually an Easter egg in media that was created by alumni of the California Institute of the Arts. You see this a lot in Disney Pixar movies. But it was actually, it's a reference to the class, the inside joke is it's a reference to the classroom used by graphic design and character animation students at the California Institute of the Arts. That includes John Lasseter and Brad Bird. So there's just like a little A113 is kind of an Easter egg joke within a lot of different medias.
That's like there's a bunch of Pixar movies that have that in it.
Yeah. I think there's a very large amount of Pixar and Disney. It's pretty much anyone. I think. I don't know if it's a nod from the alumni or if it's a nod to the alumni, but basically it's the classroom that was used by those students. Oh, Hiko is correcting me. I think every Pixar movie does have a nod to it.
Nice.
But yes, that was my trivia contribution on the depressing story of the crew of the Sophia.
Yeah.
It's a really sad card.
So, in response to Taylor B's assessment of the events at the beginning of D2. I don't think they'd bat an eyelash at dropping everything and running. I don't think that and not that he implied this, but the implications that Dead Orbit, Dead Orbit. Dead
chiclet.
Dead Orbit. I don't think that Dead Orbit.
Hashtag. Pew pew. Choo choo.
Just for you,
Are you
Justin.
done?
Just for you, Justin.
So I don't think that Dead Orbit is complicit in the events of the D2 opening, but I do think that they are not deterred by it like some of the other factions will be. I know I'm not Dead Orbit. New Monarchy will probably have their tenets and their whole foundations will be rocked to the core. Future War Cult, they'll kind of be like, meh. This is what we do.
So they're like, we told you it was coming.
Yeah.
You want to use our armory now?
Yeah. Sorry.
Gary blew it up.
Yeah. And also, if I don't get a sunshot during the first mission, I'm going to ask for a refund.
That was a fun gun.
Yes, it was. No, yeah. So, I mean, that's a good take on it. Do you want to move to potatoes?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
To potatoes, golden prose here. So the title of this one from our good friend Infested Potato, who, if you didn't listen to our extra lore episode yet, check it out. It's about the lore of Horizon Zero Dawn. Yes. With our good friend Infested Potato, who also wrote this wonderful write-up on Dead Orbit. And it's called Beyond Soul's Edge. Our worlds are a graveyard, but most live in ignorance, snuggling up to the tombstones, hopeful but blind. Our golden age is dead, dead like the traveler. Let them boast, rest in peace. Humanity should not die in her cradle, but like a scared child we remain. Look beyond soul's light. There is where we will survive. That is where we will thrive, beyond the care of the traveler. Our star may burn bright for millions of years still, but life as we've known will not. Leave behind these cold, dead worlds. Let them spin forever alone and abandoned, while we go far beyond where anyone has ever dared. Gather anything and everything. We will need them for the long journey ahead. Our new lives start beyond the edge. Don't be afraid. Sorry, butchering that like I did.
Reading is hard.
Reading and words is hard. Yeah, but that's really good. That's really good. I love that our new lives start beyond the edge. Don't be afraid. That is the Dead Orbit equivalent of it gets better.
No, it's yeah, that's exactly what I was just about to say. That's the equivalent of grow a pair.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So you guys got what are your shout outs this week, Green?
Normal book club, Starship Troopers, fun stuff. Talking about military people, talking about Heinlein. Justin's even in chat. So if you want to see a rare Justin, jump in there.
It's a very, very rare thing to have him. But I think it's particularly because of the subject.
Starship Troopers!
Yeah.
I was so loud that night.
Yeah. No, honey, you're loud every night.
That was a cell phone night, by the way. Like, that's
it's impressive how loud you can get sometimes.
I project.
Yes, you do. You have good pair of lungs, honey.
It's like James Earl Jones, Justin, Elvis Presley. That's I project.
Anyways, what's your other shout out screen? let's just move on. Just move on.
Totes my
My
goats.
shout out is actually to Infested Potato for joining us on Wednesday, because we tag teamed that game up because we played that game. So
Justin and I are still looking for that game.
Yeah, I've been on Xbox One Marketplace ever since that podcast. Can't find it. I don't think it
weird.
exists.
It feels very, very weird. Like the controller it's weird. It's weird, dude. It's so light. It's so light and just
crazy.
Like the thumbsticks are in weird places, and it's just so weird. It's just I don't like how it feels, but the game is so pretty.
It's powered by the devil.
No. The gunslinger will take care of that. It's all fine. It's all fine.
Gumslinger. No.
Justin, what are your shout-outs?
This episode brought to you by Fruit Strike Gum. By the grace of the Gumslinger, we will all be saved.
Hey, I come back just for that comment. I was going to go take a... And I come back for that comment, because this is... Oh, boy.
Pucky.
Yeah.
Okay. I keyed. My shout outs are to the Gumslinger, through whom all things are possible. And also I'm sorry.
She can't even leave chat.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Yes. Also, big shout out to Infested Potato for dragging Blue and I through the weeds that is Horizon Zero Dawn. Seriously, if there's one game, and I've said this a couple times, and I really do mean it, if there's one game that can make me buy a PlayStation, it's probably that one. I can't think of another one that really piques my fancy that I can't get at on Xbox. So definitely check that episode out if you're into that lore. And also just big shout out to the live chat. I don't think I've done that enough here lately. You guys are freaking awesome. Keep the dispatches rolling. Taylor B, Infested Potato, all the awesome people who send those in. And also, big shout out for the 100th episode giveaway. Definitely check that out. Blue has more on that, how you get access to that, and also, more importantly, what it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, first off, really big, again, thank you for all the people who have sent in dispatches. We really appreciate them. If you guys want, we take those through email. If you want to email or message me on Discord, that's one way. And then also we are starting to do that over on Twitter. If you use hashtag AskFFC, we follow that and try to collect all those before the shows each week. Big shout out to this week's subscribers or patrons, Dolan128 and Black Flag CTG. We really appreciate your guys' support. If you are at all interested in joining that group, just let us know. We'll be more than happy to point you in the right direction of that. And then, yes, we are doing the episode 100 giveaway. It is going to be a digital copy of Destiny 2 or a gift card for the console of your choice, which does include, I'm imagining it'll probably be Steam, but it will be a PC. We'll make sure to get you that as well. All we're asking is your entry will be a review over on iTunes. And when you do that, just be sure to include your Discord username so that I can get a hold of you if you win. And then hashtag FFCD2. And what we're going to be doing on there is I'm going to just be kind of collecting those throughout up until the episode 100. We are asking that we get those in. I think it's September 4th. I have it all written on the website, but we are asking that they get turned in by September 4th because iTunes kind of takes a while to show those up. If it gets close to that time and you submit it and you want to go ahead and just send me a screenshot of it so that I make sure to get your name into the list, please feel free to do that. I'm, on Discord. That's the easiest way. But yeah, that's really the entry. And then what we're going to do is we're going to compile a list, run a random number generator, and then bam, we'll announce the winner on episode 100, which will be September 8th, 2 days after Destiny 2 launches. So we're really looking forward to that as well. And yeah, and just real quick, we do the shout outs and the big thank yous to the subscribers over on Twitch, and then the patrons through the Podbean crowdfunding, simply because those funds really help us make sure that everything can continue to get better. That's where that kind of helps us do that as well. So really appreciate that. And like I said, if you guys have any questions on that, please let us know. We're more than happy to answer any of your questions either through email or through Discord private messages or even a DM over on Twitter. But yep, you guys good for an outro at this point?
Do it.
Yes.
Do it.
With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for a live streaming of the episode each week, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Links to all our other sites can also be found with our episode archives over on the new and improved www.focusfirechat.com. Please be sure to email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any feedback or questions for our team concerning the podcast. And please, please, please let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback on iTunes as well. Also, make sure to check out our partner podcast within the Guardian Radio Network over on theguardiansofdestiny.com. So, until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.